All right. Now that we're done with our models, we will go into creating our repositories. There was one other thing I did want to mention about the models. When it comes to names of fields that have like two words, where in the actual database we have, instead of first name in camel case with the N being capitalized, we have first underscore name. So whenever the naming is done like this in the database, Spring will automatically convert this into this when we're actually doing our SQL calls to the database. So this will become this automatically. So you don't have to worry about that. Just make sure that you do have it camel case. Don't have last and then name with lowercase n, or it will not work correctly. So make sure that you have camel case and everything will work fine. So now after this, we can go ahead and start making our repositories. This will probably be the easiest thing that we do because there's almost no code that needs to be written. So we can go here, create a new interface. Don't create a class, create an interface. And we can put this in a new package. We will call this package domain. And in this package, we will create repositories for each one of the models that we just created. So we started off with trip. So we would do a trip repository. So once you do this, you can come here, click the add, type in JPA repository. All right. Then make sure you add that. So it's here, JPA repository. Click finish. So when it creates this this interface, it will have this here. So this JPA repository is what we're going to be using. So we need to put where this T is, we put our class, our model. This is where the model goes. And then where this ID is, we put our ID type. So for our trip, we will put trip here because that is our model name. So the model here, the model name is trip. So we will put trip here because that's our model. And then for ID, we will put integer. All right. Because if you go back to trip, you see that our ID is of type integer. So here we need to put integer. You cannot put the primitive type in here. You have to put the wrapper class integer. So make sure that you put the full integer here and not the int primitive type. That will not work. All right, so this is it for the repository. So in order for Spring to know that we want this to be a bean, we have to do pretty much the same thing we did with the models and add an annotation. However, we're not going to be using the entity annotation for this one. We will be using an annotation that is called repository. So we will say at repository. All right. And then you can import this annotation. All right. So once you import the annotation, it'll be coming out of the org Spring Framework stereotype repository. That's where it's coming from. And that's it. So we do this for each repository that we need to make. So we have the trip. So we need to make ticket and customer repositories. So you go here, you go to domain, right click, new, create another interface, and do the exact same thing for the ticket. All right. Oh, I forgot to extend this JPA repository, but you can always just type it in the old-fashioned way. JPA repository, and then we need the ticket, and it is also an integer. There we go. And last but not least, add the repository annotation at the top to let Spring know that we want this to be a bean. All right. Next up, we have one more, and this will be the customer repository. Oh, I did class. That is not what we're looking for. Make sure you are creating interfaces. They have to be interfaces. So this one will be the customer repository. Once again, I forgot to add the JPA, but we can do that ourselves. Also an integer. All right. All right. And that is it. Oh, I did not import. There we go. And that is it. So now we are completely done with the repositories. So these are the interfaces that will interface with our database. So we will use these to actually persist and retrieve our entities. So that is all for this lesson. I will see you in the next one where we create our services.